All right, today we're going to be talking about sleep and mindfulness at Stanford. So, to give a brief overview of our presentation, we're going to first introduce the basics of sleep, then we're going to take a look at sleep disorders and some common myths about sleep, and we'll finish off with the bulk of our presentation, which is focused on the connection between sleep and mindfulness. To get started, let's walk through the basics of the sleep cycle. There are three states in which your brain can function: awake, non-REM, and REM. Today, we're going to focus briefly on REM and non-REM states, as these are the states in which you're asleep. Non-REM can be broken up into three stages. The first stage, you honestly might not even realize you've fallen asleep. Your eyes are closed and your body movements begin to slow down, but you can be woken up very easily. During the second stage, you're transitioning into a deeper sleep. In this stage, eye movements stop and your body slows down even more. The final stage of non-REM sleep is also referred to as slow wave sleep, and this is where you fall into a deep sleep. Moving on to REM, REM sleep follows these three stages and is characterized by rapid eye movements, hence the abbreviation REM. This is the state where all dreaming occurs and your brain is very active. It takes about 90 minutes to cycle through all three stages of non-REM and REM sleep. This cycle then continuously repeats throughout the night. Another crucial component to our sleep is our circadian rhythm. Basically, we have a 24-hour internal clock that helps regulate when we should sleep based on our environment. We can think of the human circadian clock as a two-process model. To sum up the first component, homeostatic sleep drive, the longer you're awake, the more tired you get, and vice versa. The second component, our circadian drive for wake, keeps us from being tired enough to sleep and works independently from what our true need for sleep may be. When combined, these two forces regulate our sleep patterns. Lastly, I want to touch on the topic of sleep debt, as it is extremely pertinent here at Stanford. Sleep debt occurs when you don't get sufficient sleep and can build up if lack of sleep continues for an extended period of time. To help us better understand this concept, let's look at an example. Let's say your body needs 8 hours of sleep to properly function. Over a random 4-day period, on the first night, you only get 6 hours of sleep. Being that this is 2 hours less than what you needed, you have now accumulated 2 hours of sleep debt. The next night, you get 7 hours. That's another hour of sleep debt added to your total. On the third night, however, you get 10 hours of sleep. So you actually gain back 2 hours of sleep you had lost from previous nights. Then on the fourth night, you only get 5 hours. So even though you had gained back a couple hours of sleep, you still accumulated a total of 4 hours of sleep debt over this 4-day period. So let's get into why this is a problem. Sleep deprivation can lead to irritability and mood changes, extreme fatigue, worsened memory, poor decision-making, and many other negative side effects. Additionally, it significantly increases the risk of car accidents. However, there is a way in which you can reduce these negative effects. The beauty about sleep debt is that it can be reversed by simply regaining the hours of sleep you had lost originally. Taking advantage of days where you can go to bed a little bit earlier or sleep in is super important. Both long and short naps are also great ways to make up for smaller amounts of lost sleep. And most importantly, always remember, drowsiness is red alert.
Thanks so much, Lexi. Next, we're going to move on to talking a little bit about some sleep disorders that are commonly believed by people everywhere. So, what is a sleep disorder anyway? Well, if you have a sleep disorder, you might look a little bit like our friend in the photo here. You'd have a lot of headaches and you probably wouldn't be feeling super well rested. But in a really general sense, sleep disorders are conditions that negatively impact your sleeping patterns or your general health. And if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at some of the common sleep disorders. I think you've probably heard of a few of these, but three of the most common are insomnia, restless leg syndrome, and sleep apnea. Insomnia is characterized by the inability to initiate or maintain sleep. So the people who say that they're getting up every 2 hours or are commonly prescribed Ambien are typically suffering from insomnia. Restless leg syndrome is sort of like a movement you can't stop. Say you're laying down in bed and you have no choice but to kick your feet or get up and walk around the room, and it prevents you from sleeping. That would be restless leg syndrome. And finally, there's sleep apnea. That's probably the most complicated of the three on the screen. And essentially what happens is there are interruptions in your breathing while you're sleeping. Typically, people who are snoring older in age or overweight will suffer from sleep apnea, but it's incredibly common across any multitude of people and can come from genetic components or from learned sleep factors. So, what exactly makes a good night's sleep? Well, one of the key things that we look for is consistency. Are you able to go to bed and wake up around the same time every single night? If not, you may be suffering from chronic sleep deprivation, and you may have quite a bit of sleep debt, as Lexi talked about earlier. Two, we look at timing. That's exactly how many hours of sleep are you getting. And in more advanced studies, we might look at what stages of sleep that you're falling into most of the night. Then we can look at the environment. Is your room as dark as possible? Is it free of sound? And is the temperature lower than your average body temperature? And fourth, we can look at your behavior. Are things like drinking alcohol close to bedtime, eating close to bedtime, or consuming a lot of caffeine as early as 3 p.m. or as late as 3 p.m. in the afternoon interrupting your natural sleep patterns? So there are a lot of common myths about sleep in the United States, and we're going to walk through a few of them here. So our first sleep myth is if you get your 8 hours of sleep, then your sleep habits are always healthy. And that's not necessarily true. Getting 8 hours of sleep is healthy, but the quality of the sleep that you're getting is also important. For example, if you drink a lot of alcohol right before going to bed, you may sleep for 8 hours, but that doesn't mean that your heart rate is dropping or that you're reaching enough REM sleep to actually fully rest and recharge your brain. And our second sleep myth is that you can nap during the day to make up for lost sleep at night. Now, this is sort of true. Getting some sleep time in through naps is helpful, but if you don't let your body complete all of its natural sleep cycles overnight, then it may not be everything that you need.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between sleep and mindfulness. I know as Stanford students, the environment we live in can be incredibly stressful, but sleep is one of the major ways that we can mitigate that stress, and consistently not sleeping well can have some pretty bad effects. However, sometimes that stress can also prevent us from sleeping, so it's important that we can de-stress in order to improve our sleep as well. The first thing I want to discuss is that you are practicing mindfulness all the time. Mindfulness is not something you do and then go back to your daily life, but the practice of mindfulness is bringing yourself to the current moment without judgment. It's this awareness that characterizes mindfulness. All sleep is not necessarily equal. Deep sleep is when your brain cleans itself out. Without it, it leads to brain fog and even dementia. Refreshment comes with slow wave sleep and REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, which are the stages N3 and REM sleep that Lexi discussed earlier. However, as Lexi said, going through a full sleep cycle takes 90 minutes. So in order to actually reach these stages, you need to be sleeping well for an extended period of time. If you don't get deep sleep, your body will be under a greater amount of stress, which leads to a psychological response that triggers a hormonal or an endocrine response, which ultimately leads to immune dysfunction and then possibly even tumor growth or cancer. So not the best effects. And another effect of stress is telomere shortening. Telomeres are a region of repetitive nucleotide sequences at the end of chromosomes, which inevitably shorten over time. However, increased telomere shortening is associated with aging, cancer, and higher risks of disease. And while telomeres do shorten regardless of stress levels, stress accelerates this process and puts you at a higher risk for the aforementioned problems. So in order to reduce your stress, one popular and tested method is meditation, which is both accessible and scientifically proven to work. Meditation is the focused awareness of the five senses that uses deep breathing methods to promote mental calming. Our whole biology is affected by stress and everything is thrown off, like during a panic attack. And meditation and slow controlled breathing are ways to reset this. It was also found that meditation was associated with increased levels of telomerase, the enzyme in cells that helps keep them alive by adding DNA to telomeres. And also, meditation was associated with increased level of gray matter in the part of the brain linked to decision-making and working memory, which is the frontal cortex. One big part of meditation is bringing yourself to the current moment and really acknowledging all of the sensory information around you. Letting all of these sensations occur without judgment and not trying to force yourself to be calm is actually how you can get the most out of meditation. And finally, I just wanted to plug some classes for mindfulness and meditation at Stanford. I personally took Bio 215 and had an amazing experience. I would highly recommend it to anyone. All of these are varying commitment levels, but can be a great place to start if you're beginning a meditation or a mindfulness journey. Thank you.